It is time to become the real estate master you've always wanted to be. Using the right words is key, and in this video, I'm going to cover all the most important vocabulary that you need to feel confident talking about real estate. Hi everyone, I'm Peter Bowman. I'm a successful real estate investor and developer. I own property in both the US and the Australian markets and have made millions of dollars for both myself and for my investors over tens of millions of dollars of real estate transactions. And today I'm here to help you become a real estate pro. If you've been wanting to invest in real estate but don't know the lingo, then this video is for you. We will cover off on the most important terms in this video, and then to give you the extra advantage, I've created a document that covers the 30 most commonly used terms in real estate, which you can download today for free. You'll find the link in the description below. I've even gone that extra mile for you and created two documents, one for the US market and one for the Australian market, because there are some subtle differences in the vocab. So starting from the beginning, what is this all about? It's about providing accommodation, a roof over someone's head, and that can be done in multiple different ways. So what we have here is a very detailed picture of a single family home, a basic house. As you can tell, I didn't go to art school, but it'll do the trick. So single family home can also be known as an SFH. Now, what would happen if we cross out that door, put a door here, and we'll imagine a line down the middle so that we now have two places for living in the same property. That would now be called a duplex because we now have accommodation for two families in the same property. Typically there'll be a firewall down the middle here, and effectively it is like two houses but connected. So there we would have a duplex. Then if we go one step further and we imagine an additional property here, potentially a row of them. That is now what we would call a condo or a townhouse, depending where you're located. In Australia, we would refer that to a townhouse. In US, condo or townhouse. Okay, so SFH, duplex, condo or townhouse. Now, for the purposes of this, mostly I'm going to focus on the single family home. My specialty is land, and that's typically what gets built on our land. Occasionally duplexes, occasionally townhouses. So when someone wants to buy a house off me or build a house on the land that I produce, how do they do that? Well, first of all, they need to provide some kind of deposit or down payment. Now, that could be 5%, 10%, 15%, 20% on the larger end. We'll work on the assumption that it's a 10% deposit or down payment. We're going to imagine that this property, this house, is worth $200,000. 200K. So this would be the price or the value. Now, if I'm putting down a 10% deposit or down payment, my 10% deposit is going to be $20,000. Now that leaves $180,000 that I need to get from somewhere. Typically that's going to be from a bank. Now, that would be called a mortgage, a loan, or a note. So if we imagine this being all of the money needed, we've got our 20% deposit, or our down payment, and then we have our mortgage. So $200,000 price, we put in a $20,000 deposit or down payment, and we get a $180,000 mortgage, note, or loan from the bank. Now, do you think the bank's going to give you those funds for free? Now, that'd be nice, especially in this current environment. But no, they're going to charge you interest on the loan. So they might say, we need to make 5% interest from your loan to make it worth our while. So they're going to charge us interest on that loan. So if you, I'll do this for easy math's sake, if you borrowed $100,000 and your interest was 5%, you would pay $5,000 in interest per year on that $100,000. And unless you pay down that principal amount, that's another word there, principal amount. So the initial amount that you borrow is called the principal. Unless you pay down that principal, then your interest is going to stay the same, assuming your interest rate is fixed. So you would be paying $5,000 every single year on that loan. Now, what happens if you pay down the principal? Okay, well, so that would mean paying the $5,000 per year as well as a bit more to reduce your loan down each year, which is going to have your interest payments reduce each year. Now, that would be called a principal and interest loan compared to an interest-only loan. Interest-only loan, you never pay down the principal while it's interest only. So that will have your repayments, there's a new word, repayment. So if you have a principal and interest loan, your repayments will reduce. However, if you have an interest-only loan, your repayments will never reduce, but they will start off being a little bit lower, which makes them very attractive to start with, but over the long term can be expensive. So why would we buy a property? Why would we buy a house and rent it out? Okay, so, well, that's the good question. So if we have our single family home, which shouldn't have a wall down the middle there anymore, and it would have one door. So we have our single family home and we're going to rent it out. We're not going to live in it. So that means we are going to have rental income. Now, another word for rent would be to lease. So those two are interchangeable. So it could be rental income or it could be lease income. So that is what someone is going to pay us for the privilege of living in our house. So let's say we can rent this property for $250 a week or $1,000 a month. Now, in the US, they talk in months. In Australia, we talk in weeks. To keep things simple, we're going to talk months. So rental income of $1,000 per month. Now, let's assume for a moment that our mortgage repayment is $750 per month. So the difference between the $1,000 per month and the $750 per month mortgage repayment is cash flow. That's good. We like cash flow. So this difference here, that's what we're after. That is the foundation of a sustainable real estate portfolio. So if this was the other way around, if our repayment was $1,000 a month and our rental income was only $750 per month, then that means we are having to put in $250 per month out of our own pocket, out of your wage, out of your income. Now, the question here is, you might be able to sustain that for one property, but how many properties can you buy working on that method? You're going to have to get your income to grow quite substantially to be able to sustain that. Now, the other issue with that is there's only two ways to make money out of real estate. One is cash flow. The other is an increasing price. Now, this one you have a lot less control over. That relies a lot more on the general market. Now, there are some tricks and there are ways to push that up, and we will cover that. But if you're relying only on this, it makes it very expensive to hold the property in the meantime, and it's certainly not adding to quality of living. We'll come back to that. So we've got rental income of $1,000, we've got mortgage repayment of $750, and we've got cash flow, positive cash flow of $250. Now, this mortgage repayment, what does that cover? Now, that's different depending where you live. So in America, it is probably PITI, principal, interest, tax, and insurance. Because in America, the bank wants to make sure that the property is insured and they want to make sure you're ahead of your property taxes. So no one else gets a claim over your property. Whereas in Australia, you've got to pay your principal and your interest, but you are responsible for the insurance and you are responsible for the property taxes. Now, the other thing we need to include here as well is the running costs or expenses. So those are any other expenses involved in maintaining this house. Now, depending on the lease arrangement and depending where you live, the tenant, the person living in the property and renting it from you, is largely going to be responsible for looking after the property, but they're not responsible for maintenance. And when I say maintenance, I mean maintenance on the house or the property itself. They are not responsible for the cost of repairing gutters, of repairing windowsills, of repainting. That is the cost of the landlord. So there's a new word, landlord. Those running costs, new word, are responsibility of the landlord and do come out of that cash flow. When you do your feasibility on whether it is worth buying a property, you need to allow for running costs in those numbers, because if you assume that everything is going to go perfect and nothing is ever going to go wrong, then your feasibility is wrong, because there will be maintenance costs, there will be upkeep. At some point you will need to renovate the house in the future, and storms will happen, damage will happen. You don't always get good tenants. So you do need to allow for running costs in your feasibility, and that does come out of your cash flow. Now, I said there were two ways to make money out of real estate. One is cash flow, the other one is if the price goes up, the value of the property goes up. So that can happen just because the general market increases. Now, historically in developed areas, real estate prices over the long term do increase. Now, that is not to say that they increase every single year. They do not. So you do need to think of real estate as a long-term investment, depending on your strategy, admittedly. But if the price does go up, that gives us something called equity. And we love equity. Equity is really good. So equity is the difference between the value of the property and the remaining debt on the property. Now, when you purchase the property, you purchased it for $200,000. You put in a 10% deposit for $20,000, and you got a mortgage of $180,000. So at that point, your equity was the $20,000 that you put in. Now, if the price were to go up to say $300,000, let me move this up again. Now the equity is $300,000 minus the $180,000 mortgage. You now have $120,000 worth of equity. Now, one of the most important parts about that is a type of profit. It is a paper profit. So a paper profit means it hasn't been realized. It can disappear if the market changes. But it is a paper profit of $100,000. $200,000 price up to $300,000. So you now have equity of $120,000 in total. Now, you don't need to sell the property to access that profit. You can borrow against it. Because if the lender is still willing to lend you 90% of the property's value, well, 90% of $300,000 is $270,000. Now, you only have a $180,000 mortgage. So if you were to borrow more, up to that $270,000, that's giving you the ability to borrow another $90,000. Well, you bought this property with $20,000. So how many more houses can you buy with that additional $90,000? I hope a light bulb moment just went off, because you started with $20,000 and only a few years later, you now have 4 properties. Pretty exciting. Now, what's really important to understand here is not every property makes money. Never ever buy real estate on general wisdom. Buy real estate on specialized knowledge. And that's what you're starting to build here today, is specialized knowledge. Because the moment you know more than others, the more opportunities open up to you. You already know a lot more about real estate than I did when I first started, so you've got an advantage. So when you buy real estate, never buy it guessing what your profit should be. Know what your profit is going to be. Do a feasibility study. Do all the numbers. Create a spreadsheet, create a list on a page, whatever it might be, but go through everything line by line and get clear on what the costs are going to be and how you're going to make a profit out of it. Know what your exit strategy is going to be. Know how you're going to get your profit and what that profit is going to be. Because if you don't do that, the likelihood is you're going to buy real estate that doesn't make money, which is what 99% of people do. As one of my mentors used to say, make your money when you buy. Now, I did promise to share with you some of the ways that you can force the value or the price of the property to go up. Now, one of them, which most people are familiar with, is renovation. Now, renovation, you have the ability to both increase the value of the property as well as increase the rental income. So that's a really powerful one. Next is subdivision. This is my favorite. So subdivisions is when we take a larger parcel of land and we divide it into more. So that could be 1 into 2, could be 1 into 10, 1 into 20, 50, 100,000. The opportunities there are limitless. Other opportunities are straddle titling. So in some cases, when you have a duplex or condo situation or unit situation, you might be able to purchase a building that has several dwellings within it, but they're currently all on the one title. Strata titling is when you separate them onto different titles and sell them off individually. It's a little bit like going to a cafe. If you buy the whole cake, it might be $10, but if you bought 10 pieces that made up a whole cake, in total it might cost you $15. Well, both subdivision and strata titling work on the same principle for profit. So those are 3 of the most common ways to push up the value of a property or to increase the equity that you have in a property. So guys, I hope you've got value out of that. Now don't forget, click the link below and download that list of the 30 most commonly used real estate terms. That is a huge advantage that I did not have when I got started. So take the help. If you got value out of this, if it helped you, make sure you hit subscribe and the notification button so you know when I put out new content. Until then, invest safely.